You know, a lot of folks think that when they're looking to buy a business, it's much similar when you're looking to buy a home. You look at a bunch of opportunities and you pick one and you buy it. The bottom line is that when a business is making an acquisition for strategic or synergistic purposes, it's not quite that simple. In fact, 67% of acquisitions made by strategic and or synergistic buyers are deemed unsuccessful a year and a half or 2 years down the road. The analysis indicates that they bought the business for the wrong reasons, or didn't buy the right business, or didn't have enough information on the business that they were acquiring to make the proper decision. So we've learned over the years that the most important thing to do is to take the time to make the right acquisition. And it really becomes a consultative program. RASSP is a consultative approach to an acquisition. You know, the Robbinex Acquisition Strategic Search Program was created to take the time to understand the needs, wants, and issues of the acquirer, and then find a business that matches within that situation. And this is a long, tedious process, and I thought we'd like to share this with you so you get an understanding of how best to go about that acquisition search. The thing you really need to do is be able to say 5 years from now that you made the right acquisition, that your business has evolved the way you wanted it to evolve because you made the acquisition, and how much value would your business increase by if you made this change. What we're looking at here is a flow chart that indicates some of the steps that we need to go through to actually make the right acquisition. You know, and it's surprising how complicated it is. The work time to do an acquisition can easily run between 600 to 800 working hours. And as you look at this worksheet, you're going to see that there's a number of job functions on there, and it's not uncommon to have 6 or 7 or 8 different specialties in terms of knowledge that's required to help make the right acquisition. We've broken it down into 3 steps. Step 1 is to do the research and analysis of the business itself that's going to do the acquisition, and then create a strategic acquisition model. Step 2 is then to develop the acquisition strategy based on step 1. And surprise, surprise, the 3rd step is to implement the acquisition strategy. It's not really that complicated when you look at it in steps 1, 2, and 3. But the bottom line is we have a tendency to forget step 1. And the net result is we're not making the right acquisition. We look at step 1 as being part of the 3 E's. We're going to evaluate and analyze the business. We're going to get into effective planning and a simple execution of the plan. The first part is understanding the past and the present. Where have we been and where are we at? And then we plan the future. It seems simple, but for some reason, most business folks have a tendency not to do this. Step 1 of that is to research the current industry of your business. Let's take a long, hard look at what's happening in your business. Review and analyzing your performance within the industry. You may be outperforming your standards of your industry, or you may be underperforming. We need to understand where you stand. SWOT analysis are really important things to do, and that basically stands for the strengths, understanding all the strengths of the business, understanding the weaknesses of the business, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats. And we look at SWOT, and the first 2 are things we can control. We can control our strengths and our weaknesses, but we can't control opportunities and threats. Usually they're beyond our direct level of control, but if we understand what we're dealing with, we can then create the strengths and overcome the weaknesses to be able to deal with the opportunities and or the threats. Taking the time to create your vision and your growth strategy, and always do that with financial projections. Then you develop your acquisition objectives and criteria. Just really simple when you think about it. Step 2, we start looking at potential targets. And we take the time to approach and qualify those targets. How are we going to reach out to them? The most important thing, and this is so hard to understand, is we need to develop a trusting relationship with the seller. If the seller thinks you're a good guy, even though you're a competitor, the chances are that you're going to have a better opportunity to make an acquisition or some kind of relationship with that seller. One of the things we need to have executed right at the beginning is a non-disclosure agreement as you collect the target's information. When we go out and talk to somebody on behalf of a client, the very first thing we do is sign a non-disclosure agreement right at the very beginning. Everything we're talking about is confidential. And Mr. Seller, if you don't want the purchaser to know who it is, then we won't tell them. We'll keep it just between us. What we're doing there is we're creating a trusting relationship between us and the seller. If you're doing this directly yourself, the NDA is so important. Look, I'm not going to use this information against you. I'm not going to use it for my business, but I need to understand it if I'm going to make an acquisition of your company. Then you need to sit down and do an in-depth analysis and research the potential targets. We might have 3 or 4 targets, and all of them have different attributes, strengths, weaknesses. They have their own threats, their own opportunities, and how they fit with yours. Then we get involved in doing preliminary due diligence. Is this really the business that I want to have? And then we value the target. What's it really worth? What's it worth to us? What's it worth to the seller? And then we negotiate the letter of intent. The letter of intent is not a binding agreement, but an indication of your desire to buy the business, and then subject to doing in-depth due diligence in step 3. So we like to use a virtual data room when we're doing that, and you can acquire one of these. It's not expensive, but you can acquire them on a one-by-one basis, or you can acquire a whole platform to do it. And then the due diligence advisor's work is facilitated by the virtual data room, because as you collect this data, you're getting ready to buy the business. Your lawyer's going to see the data, your accountant's going to want to see the data, your tax advisors may want to see the data. For sure, your financing organization is going to want to see the data, i.e. your banker or your private equity firm or the mezzanine funding organization you're going to have to finance this thing. And then you need to be able to see the drafting and negotiation of the contracts and make sure that the lawyers are drafting the contract with the spirit of the intent of the deal that you've put together. You know, it's really easy for the lawyer to get a little bit carried away and draft a contract and start negotiating directly his contract rather than negotiating your deal. There should be no change in the purchase price, in the terms and conditions, the management contract you've negotiated with the individual, the terms and conditions if there's a portion of the fund that's being paid in the future, or some kind of a financing arrangement with like a note or a promissory note with the seller. So we need to make sure that the contracts follow the spirit of the deal, because as soon as they don't, the other side's going to go ballistic. So if you say the price is $100 and your lawyer writes the price at $90, I can tell you that the seller's lawyer is going to go ballistic, and you're going to now have a major problem. So make sure that any contracts that are moving the other side, you've reviewed them and you've made sure they follow the spirit of the deal. If they don't, you need to give your lawyer a little bit attitude adjustment. The step 3, facilitating financing, is really an important part of the whole project. If you have to go to your bank and finance, you want to know almost in advance that the bank is there to support you and what rules and regulations and ratios and covenants they're going to look for in this transaction to make it work. Facilitating the closing process should be straightforward, and your lawyer should be able to handle it fairly well. But once again, you need to oversee what that lawyer is doing. And when it's all done, there needs to be post-closing reconciliation. You bought the business and you expected the working capital to be at a certain level, and it's not. How are we going to adjust for it? Or it's higher, and you're going to have to write out of the check. And when do you write the check, and how soon do you do it? So this post-closing reconciliation is particularly critical, that the client you're buying the business from, the seller, is comfortable that you're going to be straightforward and honest in doing that reconciliation. And you want to be able to make that work the way you said it's going to work, because at the end of the day, the problem is that the seller will be talking to other targets that you're looking to buy and may make it easier and very difficult for you to do your acquisition. So that at the end of the day, you want that seller to be able to say to another potential seller that you're talking to 6 months or a year and a half down the road, these guys are great, they did a wonderful job, they were honest, they were straightforward, there were no surprises. The acquisition search process is quite complex. Just looking at this worksheet, and you'll have a copy of this. If you like it, we'll send it to you. It's not a big deal, but you'll see all the different steps that we're going through as we're researching the industry. Then we're analyzing it. One of the greatest tools that you can create yourself is what we call a vertical and horizontal ratio analysis of your financial statements. So you list your profit and loss statement each of the last 5 years, and then you do the percentage of the costs against the revenue for each of the last 5 years. And then you just print the ratio analysis, not the actual numbers. And if the ratios are changing dramatically from one target level to another level, then we've got a problem and we need to understand what that is. And understanding that is a basic step in knowing how we're going to solve or address the problems you're trying to address by doing an acquisition. You need a high-level vision. Where are you going to be when this is all done? What do we need to do to make sure we're going to get there? So you create a roadmap with milestones in the roadmap to make sure you're hitting the different steps. You'll find some of that process when you get into the video on the 1053 program. As you're looking at this process, you can see in the different sections that there's quite a bit of detail. And it's the detail that most people have a tendency to try to take a short circuit on and say, oh, I understand all that stuff, I'll just get her done. You know, the old saying, if it's a good job, get it over with. If it's a bad job, get it done, just do it. Doesn't work when you're doing acquisitions. And as you can see by the color coordination, these take months. This isn't something you do in a week or 2 weeks or maybe in 3 or 4 weeks. We're looking on average of somewhere between 9 and 15 months to do the average acquisitions. And some of them can easily run into being 2-3 years long, and you'll see as we walk through this. You need to evaluate and really learn about your business. The comprehensive strategic analysis of transition alternatives, coupled with a SWOT analysis, understanding the goals and aspirations, the fits, the lack of fits, where the opportunities lie, where is the synergy. If you buy another business, will you be able to acquire raw materials at a lower price because of higher volume? Will your sales team be more efficient? Will your advertising become less expensive as a percentage of revenue? And as you walk through the model, we'll show you at the end of this video an acquisition that we did as a case study, which is really fascinating. As you establish the criteria, you create a business plan, you develop your target list, and you execute. Once again, it's just following the 3 E's. It's following the steps of what we talked about at the very beginning of this. And looking at the the assessment and preparation of it, once again, you can see that it's spread over months. It's not an instant thing. You can't do it quickly, and if you think you're going to do it quickly, you're going to screw up. Identify your targets, create the strategy to reach out to those targets, and then meet with the targets and qualify and quantify those targets. Maybe it's a great target, but it's in the wrong area. Maybe it's a great target, but it's overlapping everything you're doing, and all of a sudden you may lose customers as a result. Maybe they've got the same equipment you have, and there's no advantage in making that acquisition because you've already got equipment that's not operating at capacity. So as you start looking at all the little bits and pieces in your business, you need to look at all the little bits and pieces in the business. And then you need to summarize the 5 or 6 or 7 targets you've identified. You look at the revenues, the number of employees, how long they've been in business, and so on and so forth, as you can see in this worksheet. And then when you've looked at all the businesses you've looked at on a comparative worksheet, 1 or 2 will stand out as being, that's the one I should be trying to buy. And that's where you want to put your focus on. We run into some really interesting challenges when you talk to somebody about, would you like to sell your business? And the first challenge we deal with, my business isn't for sale. Well, maybe it isn't today, but maybe in 4 months or 6 months or a year, 18 months or 3 years or 4 years it will be. So this is the point where you want to develop that trusting relationship. And you want to just take your time and do that and not appear to be in a great hurry to take over this person's business. The next thing that happens when you talk to somebody who's thinking of selling their business is they run into a problem. The dollar signs start to grow to their eyeballs. All of a sudden they think, wow, my business is really worth a lot of money. Somebody's trying to buy it. And you need to be able to work within that to indicate to the guy that you're prepared to pay a fair price, a willing price, and if you're realistic in your price expectations, we'll be able to put a transaction together. The next thing we find is these guys are too busy. They're so busy they haven't really thought about it. They got no time to think about it now. They're busy running their business on a day-to-day basis, and I can tell you the average business owner works 68 hours a week. Maybe it's not all in the office, but I can tell you he's thinking about his business when he's driving to and from work, when he's going to meetings, he's going to conferences, he's going to workshops, he's going to seminars, he's going to trade shows. He's busy. I can tell you that on Saturday morning he's reading business material at home. Sunday afternoon he's reading stuff that he shouldn't be reading or doing planning. These guys work. Our psychologists tell us the average entrepreneur works 68 hours a week. They don't have time to think about doing a sale unless there's some pressing problem. And when they do start to think about it, there is so much that they're going to think about. that they're going to start to procrastinate. They might say, my God, I haven't got time to think about this. Call me in 5 years. Because they're just going around, they say, I haven't got time for it. I'm too busy running my business. And they'll start procrastinating. And this is where they start looking at alternatives to selling their business. And there are at least 14 alternatives to selling the business. Perhaps the kids should take the business over. Maybe one of the key employees should be do a buyout, an employee buyout. Maybe they should merge with somebody else. And you need to be in their head to understand what their goals and objectives are so you can determine if you can fit in that situation. They're not sure about the inquiry. They're worried about confidentiality, which is why I said to you at the very beginning, we need to have the non-disclosure agreement signed right up front. And another big problem we have, a lot of these clients have no life after business plan. They don't know what they're going to do the day after they sell their business. Since that point in time, we always make sure that a client has a life after business plan. So if you're talking to somebody whose business you want to buy, find out what he's going to do after business, after it's sold. And if he doesn't have a plan, maybe you can create a plan for him. One of the plans I often recommend is that the client or the seller works for the purchaser or for you for, say, 5 years. He works full-time for 90 days. He works part-time for 90 days. And for the next 4.5 years, he's on call to be an ambassador to your company. He goes to trade shows. He goes to conventions. He may have lunch with some of your major customers or major suppliers just to keep his foot in the door, and he gradually phases out. And during that time, you encourage him to get involved in community activities with the hospital board or the library board or maybe a Rotary Club or something other, or some other organization. So he's got something to do after business. Really, really critical in this. And we knew there are alternatives to selling. So if he has an alternative, then you want to clarify or quantify, is it a reasonable alternative? And if it is, then don't waste your time. The next thing we need to understand is emotions plays a huge role in the sale of a business. I mean, it's massive. In our role as business intermediaries, we've learned that we spend about 60% of our working time in a psychological mode, dealing with the wants and needs of an animal we call the human. His family, his wife, his kids, his lawyer, sometimes the lawyer's personal issues, his accountant, sometimes the accountant's personal issues, sometimes other members of the lawyer's team or the accountant's team are causing emotions within that organization that we find we've had to deal with. So be aware of emotions because we like to eliminate them. Job one, can we chat? Let's see if we can do business together. We're back to developing that trusting relationship. Job two is to understand the goals and aspirations of the client. What does he want to do? Does he fit with what you want to do? Job three, address his needs, his concerns, his pain. Oh man, I wouldn't know what to do if I sold my business. I've got nothing to do afterwards. I've got to keep working. And we've seen people like that, where the 5-year employment contract program comes into place that I just talked about. Create a proposal that will address the needs, the concerns, the issue of the seller of the business, if it's at all possible. If you can deal with these issues, then you're going to be able to manage the emotions in a proactive way. And be prepared that you're not going to get an outright transaction. Maybe you're only going to buy part of it. Maybe you'll buy a division. Maybe you'll slowly buy it out over 5 years or 7 years. Maybe you can recapitalize the business and put some equity in it to become part of his business in that manner. Maybe you can buy out his partner. And so instead of buying 100% of the business, you buy 50% partner. Now you're a partner. Comes back to a partial acquisition or investment. Oftentimes, a business comes for sale because there's a partnership dispute. And perhaps you could buy out one of the partners and become a partner with the remaining person runs the business. Now, there's a lot of emotional issues in this, and we've got to make sure we're going to fit with the partner we're going to be in business with. A joint venture, maybe the two of you could get together and create a third company and do some kind of business together. We could do a strategic alliance where you agree to sell his products and some of your customers or vice versa. Maybe we could create a relationship with the vendors, and maybe we could find that we're buying product at a much cheaper price than he is, and we could help him tag on to our buying program. Or maybe there's a customer relationship that we have that he could take advantage of, or the converse is true. A partnering relationship, depending on a specific product or service that one of you is offering. The bottom line is, there's lots of alternatives to an outright transaction. You need to become creative and flexible when you're doing these things, because if you are, you're going to find a better deal. This process takes a lot of time. You should plan for 6 to 18 months, with the norm being 9 to 12, but be prepared for 24 or 26 months or even longer. We've seen acquisitions happen 7, 8 years after they were initially started. So you need to have a long-term business plan. And your business needs to run properly during this period of time. So you've got to become really flexible, as I said earlier. We're back to the complexity of the transaction. And if you look at the sidebars on this thing, you see all the little people sticks in there. Those are the different people who have an important role to play in each step going through this transaction. You might need a financial analysis. You might need a lean manufacturing specialist. You might need a purchasing specialist. You may need a marketing specialist, a sales specialist, a distribution, logistics. As you get into the process, the complexity is so great. And if you think you've got all the tools at your fingertips, you should look in the mirror and look at the guy who's trying to fool you, because the bottom line is you really can't do all this stuff. The first one, the target's interested. The second step is we analyze and qualify. The third step, the professionals, and they get involved and start the challenges being identified and quantified. Then we do our due diligence, and then we try to close for your objective. Once again, it's not simple. So step 3, implement the strategy. And complete it in phases. Doesn't have to be all done at once, based on your needs. So just take your time, make sure you're not disrupting your company to do the acquisition. So at the end of the day, we say to you, take your time and do it right. Take your time, make sure you know everything you know about your business. Most people don't know that much about their businesses. They think they do, but they're really focused in a narrow aspect of it. So we need to get the complete SWOT analysis on your strengths and your weaknesses, and what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and what are your opportunities, what are your needs, what's your financial capacity. And before you go knocking on doors to buy another business, you want to get to know your banker really well. And the strange thing about banks, we found that those guys like to have lunch. They like to eat. We have a tendency to say to our clients, you need to take your banker out for lunch at least a couple times a year and develop a relationship with them. Tell them the good things that are happening, and don't be afraid to share some tough things. Because if you've got some tough things, you bank, well, this is a tough thing I've got. Here's how I propose to handle it. The next time you meet the bank, say, hey, did you handle that? Oh, yeah, it's done. It's fixed. So the banker is going to develop confidence in your business ability. So this acquisition program is a long, tedious program, and there's a lot of people that should be involved in it. Your lawyer needs to be a transaction lawyer. Your accountant needs to be a forward-thinking accountant, not one of those guys who tells you what you did last year 6 months later. You need somebody who's working with you, helping you with projections, helping you with analysis. It's a team effort. And so we wish you good luck, good fortune in doing your acquisition. Thank you.